everyone, and welcome to yet another of the BBG's webinars during these interesting times. I'm sure, like me, you're looking forward to what is going to be a very interesting and I think in some ways perhaps challenging discussion. I'll now hand you over to my good friend Michael Knowles, who's going to moderate the session and introduce the speakers. Mike, over to you.
Greetings, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us. As Kalyan says, we look forward to a very fruitful and a very positive conversation. We've all been hit by this bow wave, this corona thing, and it's caused all sorts of problems. It's changed the way that we've looked at things, it's changed the way that we do things, and something we're just having to get used to because, well, who knows? Who knows? And one of the things that it has caused a problem with everywhere is education, because social distancing, for instance, and education, difficult things to handle. And that's been difficult for various universities and colleges, schools around the world. But it's also very badly affected students around the world who want to come to the UK to study, have their dreams and aspirations have been there. And now those dreams and aspirations are in a strange place. And what we want to do today is to look at the solutions, the way forward, the new things that we can do to ensure the fact that first-class quality education, international education, is available to as many people who really want it. I'm delighted to say I've got a wonderful panel with us today. I will be very brief in my introductions to them, but the one thing that I will say is they share various common denominators. They are all excellent educationalists. I've worked with every single one, first class. They care deeply about students and the situation that students find themselves in all sorts of times, and they have a passion for India. So we couldn't have a better team to help us look through what these issues. Sally Wade, I'll introduce first of all, is the Pro Vice Chancellor and the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences at Anglia Ruskin. I have to read that one, Sally, because it's a long one. But Sally also has a passion for India and spends a fair amount of her time in India. David Gloucester is the Director of Education at RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. And again, I've had the privilege of working with David over the years and witnessing his passion for education, architecture and education, and India. He's worked extremely hard to forge relationships. Delia Hennigan has had many prestigious roles in education. Her current role is as Director of Education in India for Sanames 4, an extremely powerful organization. Praveen Malhotra, well, what do I say about Praveen? The angel of the education world in India. Through her columns, through her broadcasting, Praveen's outreach is huge, into the millions, absolutely into the millions. And again, her concern and her passion about individual students and their parents is massive. And lastly, but certainly not least, Richard McCullum, who is the Vice Chair of UK IBC. Dickie will give us his view from a slightly governmental point of view, I'm sure, but Dickie is also extremely heavily involved in helping students and get to study in the UK. How are things? Could you give us a broad outline of what you've been doing over the last few months to manage the situation that you found yourself in at Anglia Ruskin?
Yes, absolutely, Mike. And hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction as well, Mike. As Mike said, I'm working at Anglia Ruskin University, and I'm going to talk particularly about the things we've been involved in. But as well as that, I'm also Vice Chair for CHEED, which is the Council for Higher Education in Art Design in the UK. So these conversations have been national conversations. And some of what I say is common to most universities, as a lot are following very similar lines now that we're well into the current situation. So we're also part of the wider UK Alliance group of universities, and we also know we're broadly in line with that group. So to reiterate, going to university is a major step and a very important one. And these are unprecedented times for all of us. And no matter what mitigation we put in place, that we're all facing with people travelling from different countries, even different parts of the UK. So at 3 different points up until Christmas, if you opt to do online, you can then choose to come to Cambridge and study as an on-campus student. International students will be treated slightly differently than that, because there are other factors in place, such as whether or not flights are available, when visas come through, and so on. They're being treated on an individual case-by-case basis. So any student who does opt for online can choose to come and join us when they're able to, and we will facilitate that. Currently, students coming from some parts of the world will need to quarantine in the UK for 2 weeks, and we are encouraging our students to come early before the start of the academic year, before the teaching starts and before induction, and we're offering free accommodation to those students during that 2 weeks. And we take student safety and well-being very, very seriously at Anglia Ruskin, and have received really positive responses from students about the support they received when we first went into lockdown. As you can imagine, there were a number of students who couldn't get home, not necessarily overseas, but also in the UK, and who were stranded to some extent in Cambridge or in Chelmsford, where our other campus is. And we made sure they were provided with a member of staff, a designated staff member who acted as a mentor. We provided students with food parcels on a regular basis. We made sure if they needed any sort of medication, this was also provided, and they were checked upon on a daily basis by the university. And we also put them all into a Facebook group. We had about 120 students at one point who were stranded in Cambridge, and it took a few weeks for some of them to be able to find their way back to wherever they wanted to go to. It is going to be deep cleaned as we go into phase 2. And then phase 3 starts in September. So we're going to continue to observe the 2-metre social distancing rule, although the UK government has reduced this now to 1 metre plus. We have planned for 2 metres social distancing. And to do this, we've extended the university day to a 12-hour day. So at all times, we're managing the numbers of staff and students on site, and they will be coming on site in 4-hour shifts. So there'll be 3 shifts in a day, and a student may do 2 of those 4-hour shifts on any one day. The on-campus experience, you'll focus on accessing spaces, equipment and teaching we can't deliver online. So we've changed the way in which we teach considerably. So this is key for a lot of subjects, such as an area I look after, which is creative art and design, performing arts. We also have a medical school, we have science and engineering. So the on-campus activity is seen as enrichment. Students will be in much smaller classes, all the spaces are cleaned, and we're providing face coverings for all staff and students. All rooms will have sanitisers in them, and equipment, if it's used, for example, if you're doing photography or making films, any equipment that we loan out, when it's returned, will be cleaned and then released after a safe period of time. So a huge amount of work.
David, how are things going with REBA? What special things are you looking at?
I think the RIBA's got a portfolio of about 108 schools of architecture all over the world, so around 57 in the UK and 51 globally. So we're getting quite a lot of feedback everywhere from Latin America to the Far East, and obviously our principal customers, if you like, in the UK. The feedback, I think, has changed in its nature very, very drastically in probably the last 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, just to reiterate Sally's points about advice changing on a daily basis, there was hardly a university that we were in dialogue with 6 to 8 weeks ago that wasn't talking about an online first semester. And I think the consensus on the university's UK site now is that 97% of all UK universities will be offering some kind of on-site teaching and learning for their students. I think this has been very carefully considered. The cynical will say, well, of course, one's got to get the economy functioning again. And there are inevitably elements of truth in that. But the issue that we're faced with is coming to terms with the realities of this situation and putting mitigating factors in place which put everybody in as advantageous a position as possible. Now, if you're talking about architecture and design, the way in which students succeed in these areas is it's a reliance on social, cultural and intellectual interaction. Much more so, I would say, than almost any other disciplinary areas. If you're teaching quantity students who are new to that experience in a school of art, architecture and design. So I think the British universities, generally speaking, are permeating the idea that there'll be on-site contact with incoming students, whether at undergraduate or at postgraduate level, so that there is a chance for a relationship to be built up between tutors and students. This issue of interaction and the relationship, I think, was fundamental to being able to close out the June semester with some actually completely excellent work completed. And all the concerns, I think, in March about this being impactful in a very, very unpromising way it hasn't really been the case. The quality of work that we've seen across the piece in the UK has been extremely high. I think that's a good thing. So the question of online lectures, my view is that virtually every campus I've seen in the UK was beginning to adopt that kind of format to some degree or another. It's becoming a global norm because students like to be able to download the lecture and benefit from it, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think in terms of teaching and learning, the notion that perhaps a majority of lectures may be online simply reflects a student who'd been offered a place in the UK, but normally resident in India. My concerns would actually be not the internal environment of the universities, it would be the external environment of the cities in which those universities are located. I would say, generally speaking, people have behaved extremely responsibly. There's a natural anxiety in the population, and we can't deny this. But the HEIs, the universities, I think, are going to be principally safe places. They're going to have phased admissions. They're going to have appointments systems in place for tutorials and access to the many digital and making facilities which our schools are well known for. The issues will advise. Make sure that a student doesn't have a long commute. Make sure that they're actually located in a similar locality to their university, so that they can walk, so that they can cycle, so that they can avoid the most impactful public transport systems. It's online presentations, online external examinations. It takes the printing issue right out of the equation. And many students have said, well, uploading drawings actually to a shared drive has proved to be a huge benefit to them. I think also part of our digital dependency, which we were rushing headlong into, has been checked to some degree. The fossils like myself, came up with nothing more sophisticated than pieces of tracing paper, pencils and pens. We were used to the analog world. In an odd kind of way, some of our digital dependency has been counteracted by the necessity. It would be foolish to suggest that any student coming from India to the UK will be facing a normal situation. But one also has to be quite pragmatic and say, what are the alternatives? We've discussed this informally in the past. When there has been a recession, generally somewhere in the world there isn't a recession. I recall this will again be betraying my age. I remember in the mid-70s there was the first oil crisis, and a lot of the work that was being generated out of the Gulf and the Middle East started to dry up, and people relocated to other areas of work. In the past, mainland Spain, the economy is rough. Spanish architecture and design graduates have hot-footed to Latin America because, with the exception of Brazil, Spanish is spoken everywhere. There were alternative markets. In the banking crisis 10 years ago, graduates hot-footed it to China because there was still work there. We are looking at a totally different situation now. Everywhere is part of this pandemic problematic. And I think it's important, therefore, to think that deferring a year's study and somehow being optimistic enough to think that everything is going to change and snap back to how it was is probably not entirely realistic, with the greatest of respect. We are going to have to negotiate a settlement with this virus. It's a bit like getting the Taliban around the negotiating table. It's one of these things you might not find particularly to your taste, but it's probably an inevitability. And I think the question that we face over the next few months is, to what degree do we make the accommodation with this crisis and take a pragmatic view forward? My personal view is that we can accommodate these things. We still need to exercise a colossal amount of individual and collective caution. But dreams are dreams, they need to be maintained, and to mix metaphors, I believe we need to whip the Huskies along to get some of those dreams delivered. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, David. And thanks, Sally. So far, looking tremendously positive, genuinely, which is very exciting. But here we go. Delia, I know that Sun and S4 have been doing a lot of research about attitudes around the globe. What are you finding in terms of the feel out there for people, or the confidence levels for people to come abroad and study?
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Mike, for inviting me to be part of the panel. It's a real pleasure to be talking with you today. And as Mike said, at SANAM S4, we're a global company, but our heartbeat is in India. And I work there with nearly 150 colleagues who support international universities, working with students and institutions in India. And since the lockdown started in India, we have been monitoring and surveying sentiment, both from students, parents, agents, institutions, about how things are going, how they're feeling. And essentially, over that period of time, we have seen, underlying the sentiment is very much, I have invested in those dreams that David was talking about. I've been planning this for a long time. I still want to have that opportunity to study abroad, whether it's in the UK or New Zealand or Canada, wherever. There is still that, wish to be able to do that. So I think that's very strong. We haven't seen that diminish. What we've seen is uncertainty. And that's been one of the very key things that we've seen through the last few months is, we're struggling with uncertainty. I mean, I think that's it's something that we can all buy into on a personal level, because as my colleagues have said earlier, things are changing on a daily basis. What you think is going to be happening on one day completely changes the next. So we've seen consistently that more than 50% of our respondents to these trend surveys we've been doing every week and now moving to every 2 weeks is this feeling of uncertainty. But the neutral feeling is very small. Only 10% has been staying consistent. People are very much saying we want to go, but we're just not quite sure when. So we've seen quite a lot of conversations going on around deferrals, or useful to your career planning with that time, it might be worth thinking about continuing your studies, even if it's not quite what you thought it was going to be. Because I think it's accelerated innovation, but keeping quality and a top class student experience at the heart, and that goes across the sector. That's something that is in the DNA of UK higher education, I would say. I spent many decades of being a part of that ecosystem. And as a Dean of Students for 15 years, I'd like to pick up on some of the points that were being made by my colleagues around teaching and learning innovation is happening. It had been happening already. Online learning, tech-enabled learning is very much part of the student experience for the 21st century. And it will be part of your employability experience as a student, living your life after university as you move into your career. So it is very important not to see this as a second-class experience or it will be different. It will bring advantages, it will bring challenges, but it is something that is going to be valuable. So I would like to talk a little bit about the pastoral side. And Sally mentioned some of those things, around the support and the care that UK universities will give to students coming in from overseas. International student support is a very high priority in UK universities, and a lot of staff specialise in that. A lot of thought and investment goes into it. And last week I was talking to one of the chief relationship officers for one of the large third-party providers of halls of residence and accommodation all across the UK. And they gave us examples of some of the amazing things that they're doing to support students, the way they've changed their business models to ensure that students' parents have reassurance about finding somewhere safe to live, being able to deal with transport issues, be close to the university, not be bound up in a contract that they might not, be able to use. So lots of things are changing at the universities, at other organisations that are linked to the universities. And not lastly, in the situation of the UK government. The UK government is working with the sector. It's UKVI are working very much hand in hand with the sector and with the British High Commission in India and with the Foreign Office at home to come up with systems and processes that reassure international students. And one of the big things for us this year in the UK was the reintroduction of the graduate immigration route, the GIR. That has been confirmed to be still available, and changes have been made to allow students to know that if they get to the UK by April, if they've started their course online, that online part of the programme will count towards their qualification for the GIR, which is very important to Indian students because return on investment is one of the key decision makers. Also today, I've been talking to my colleagues who are telling me that visas are starting to come through. The VFS office opened up last week. Visas are starting to come through, and the vignettes in your passport when you get your visa have now been extended to be in place for 90 days, not the previous 30-day period. This allows you to to have more flexibility in your traveling time. It allows you to possibly accommodate if there might be a challenge around fulfilling your registration or enrolment at the university. So the government working with the sector, they're listening to the sector who are listening to students, and they're trying to come up with solutions that both students and parents have raised as being important to them, and we need to know what's happening. I think the other thing, virtual internships, for example, have ballooned. Internships are always an important part of Indian students' choice when they are choosing UK, because it's something that we're very, very, innovative at. So those virtual internships have now, become much more common across the board. Just one example of innovations outside the normal classroom experience. And I think as an academic, this is actually something that will give rise to lots and lots of interesting and creative ways of doing what we do and thinking differently about what's important and how we make sure that we turn out students who are prepared to contribute to their spheres of work and their careers in the future. So it's not easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's come down to the grassroots. Nobody is more in tune with the heart and soul of what's going on in education in India than you. What is the feeling out there about what are parents, what are students saying from your experience about coming to the UK to study?
You know, Mike, I observe a holding pattern in the short term towards going abroad, where students might wish to wait and watch for a while before proceeding with their plans to head out. And this is primarily due to the uncertainty in the minds of students and the parents regarding when things will get back to normal. There are several factors out there which one does not have answers to, and at the moment, and which are causing concern. Like, for instance, when would travel start? Number one. When would embassies open up for issuing visas? Impact of the COVID-19 crisis in the respective country. Unemployment and the state of the economy in that country, the destination country, you know, over the next 12 to 18 months, sorry. Then also now students are evaluating their choice of countries, you know, depending on where the impact of the COVID is greatest, etc., etc. What I see across the board is that parents, you know, in India, we tend to cotton wool our children. They just go to school and come back home and go to school and come back home. Okay. Now, in this kind of scenario, we are very loath to let our children out of our sights and travel outside the country, leave aside outside the city. You know, I have hundreds of parents who come to me who don't even want to send their children out of Delhi, for instance, to do their undergraduate studies. So going abroad is a big thing. They may have the money. The children may want to go, but it's the parents who, you know, have their concerns. And now that they've had the kids at home for the last 2-3 months, you know, they're loath to let them go and sort of fend for themselves. How will they commute? How will they travel in the tube? What if they touch handles? What if they get ill? What if you're not able to get to them? How will they eat? You know, all kinds of concerns, most of them absolutely valid. And then the cost of study. Studying abroad costs an arm and a leg for an Indian student. You know, even in countries like the US, where you might get a scholarship of up to 70% of your tuition fee, even the remaining 30% can cost you an arm and a leg. Now, in that doesn't obtain as far as UK is concerned, very few scholarships, etc. So the exorbitant cost of study in the UK, and that too online in the first year, that, you know, parents see as a very big deterrent. Now, if you were to, you know, if you were to take a move and say that we're going to drastically cut down on the fees, or if we are going to do a hand-holding program in India, you know, along with the universities, maybe that would be a little reassuring and lock them in. But I don't see, or do something dramatic, I don't see the situation changing very quickly.
Thanks, Praveen. I mean, and again, you know, you are in touch with an awful lot of people. And so, you know, you're, from a consensus point of view, you're the person to talk to. So the concerns are there. And what it's coming out from what you just said is that we reach out to students, of course, but what we need to do, and what the UK universities obviously need to do, perhaps much more, is to reach out to the parents. But Dickie, can I come on to you now? Are you there, Dickie? Richard?
Hi, I'm here.
How are you doing? There were some very important points that have come out from these discussions. The UK wants international students. Let's be India specific. From what my take is that the UK loves Indian students because they do really work hard. They're bright kids, and they behave themselves in, well, you know, whatever. But they behave themselves whatever. we want two reasons. We want the international connect, and of course fees are terribly important. I mean, can you see that anything from a government point of view that might lead to what Praveen was saying, that to entice students in this difficult situation, because it's not going to be around just for a few months and go away. The stain's going to be there for a long time. What do you think, Vicky? Over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, Delia's already talked to the measures that the British government's putting in place to reassure and attract the students from India. But I think I'd like to just step back a little bit. I mean, as Canon indicated, I work in a trade and investment environment between India and the UK. So let's start with a bit of macro context. Okay, I mean, the modern bilateral relationship between the UK and India is flourishing. According to a report I read last week, India is now the second largest investor into the UK, and the UK is the fourth biggest investor in India, which is considerably above any other European country. And from a business perspective, I think there are about 800 Indian firms operating in the UK, and there's well over 500 UK firms operating in India. And importantly, there are, I think, 1.4 million people of Indian origin in the UK, one of the largest diaspora groups globally. And a really important part of that group is that sort of living bridge between the two countries are Indian students studying in the UK. And the presence of Indian students, I think, is not just a good thing for those students to get a new perspective on their world, but a very important thing for the people of the UK to have input from a diverse, dynamic, different culture. So for any student listening, we in the UK have much to learn from India and Indian students, and you're very, very welcome. Having said that, to talk to Delia's earlier point, I do realise that many people are confused and uncertain about things today. Before COVID, there was some confusion about what Brexit meant for the UK and studying there. And now we have the pandemic to contend with. And I appreciate both points, but I think what we're talking about today, higher education, is an investment for the long term, for a decade or more. So looking past that uncertainty, as I told a group of students just a week ago, it's important to remember that the UK is still a vibrant, beautiful, safe, exciting place to work and study in. And despite the pandemic and despite Brexit, some things really won't change. You know, for example, those looking for a career in financial services can be reassured, I think, that London will remain the financial capital of the Western world, for reasons linked to language and time zones and institutions and alternatives and so on. And the other thing that won't change is that UK universities will remain among the best and most good value anywhere in the world. We have a number of those universities as our clients. I spoke to a few of them last week to get a sort of sense of what they were doing. I was really impressed by some of the innovative measures they're taking. Sally's already spoken to some of those, changing start dates, redesigning campus layouts, offering a blended experience, even chartering planes to bring people over. It's extraordinary. Surprisingly, one of my clients said that his institution is up 100% on last year in terms of interest and leads. And here in India, my organisation, has been advocating on behalf of those clients to try and help them adapt, advocating with the government of India. We have a very influential higher education sector group, for example, which has made representation to the government of India to get them to allow universities from the UK of all rankings to offer online degrees in collaboration with Indian partners, which we think would be a real win-win, given the supply-demand dynamic. And I think innovation is something I'd like to just finish with. So as well as being vice chair of UKIBC, I'm a non-exec director of a small education technology company. The purpose of the company is essentially to help students make better, more informed choices through the deployment of behavioural analytics and behavioural science and data analytics. And I mention this now not as a plug, but because I think the pandemic will press fast forward on changes that are already underway. How we learn, obviously, the types of skills that are required post-COVID. But I suspect recruitment as well is going to go through a significant amount of change. When I first came to India in 2005, my job with Cathay Pacific was keeping agents happy, because that's how you sold tickets. And then the internet came along and swept that away, because most people didn't need an agent to buy online. I'm not comparing student enrollment with the sale of an airline ticket, but the principle is not dissimilar. And I come across dozens of really fascinating startups in India now who are trying to digitize the way students access information, who are trying to deploy AI, machine learning, and really, really clever algorithms to help them make better choices. And I suspect that, notwithstanding that some agents are brilliant, I suspect that's a really very good thing. So these students can use these tech tools to determine their particular area of interest. So I'd like to just finish by saying to any students listening, you've lived through the most dramatic event in your lifetime, I hope. Congratulations. Things will recover eventually, although it looks bleak now. And so use this time well to work out where and how you want to enter a, albeit altered economy, and work towards the right qualifications. And I think the UK, with its post-study work regime, is a really fantastic option that should be at the top of your list.
Dickie, that was excellent, and thank you for any questions, because I realise we're fast running out of time. We've got 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, we have the first question is, do you think for existing students who should normally get to the UK by mid-September, their earlier BRP card will be sufficient, or you think there'll be new restrictions, health checks will be introduced for arrival into the UK?
I would just, Mike, I was just going to suggest that that's really quite a specific question that probably needs to be directed to the university that you are enrolled at, and they will have their international student advisors who will be able to answer that particular question, because it is quite a specific immigration one, and people should always be very careful about sort of giving general answers to specific immigration questions. So do get in touch with your university, they will help you.
So there are always good things to come out of the adversity like this. What do the panel think are the good things that students will get out of all this when they come to the UK?
Sally, can you take that up?
Yes, I think in terms of what the learning experience is going to be like, I think picking up on what other colleagues have already said, the amount of energy and effort and creativity that has gone into changing the student learning experience now, I think is going to provide a much more sophisticated online activity that's richer. It's not just about putting PowerPoints online and giving boring lectures. It's far more interactive than that. And also the investment that's taking place into the physical learning on campus is going to almost give the best of two worlds. And I think that's going to be really valuable for students. And I think that's going to stay. That's the bit that will stay with us, I think, that rich experience of being able to access materials when you're off site and revisit and relearn from things because they're recorded or they've been placed in a virtual learning environment of some sort. Plus, a sort of very specialist, heightened, dedicated small group teaching on campus are going to be two really important things.
How do the panel see that the British government can best help support foreign students coming to the UK during this difficult time?
Yeah, happy to answer that. I think that that the British government is already doing what they can. I mean, we're seeing there is a high level response group that consists of senior government people, senior people from the university sector, who are all working together to move ahead some of the things that we've already talked about, the GIR, extending the preliminary period of your visa being approved. So I think the government is very much, as Dickie said, Indian students are valuable to the UK for a whole range of reasons because of that long-standing relationship, and they are fabulous students who bring so much with them that it's definitely a priority for the government to support the university sector in being able to welcome international students. So they are doing quite a lot. Sometimes you don't always see what government is doing, but it is happening.
I will now pass over to our...
Hi, I think, Mike, you summed it very nicely, but let me just tell you that I really enjoyed this session. So many insights, and let it of a student who is actually studying in the UK, who is into his third year of year in industry at the University of Sheffield. So it was very important for me to understand and gather these insights that how things will work and how all of you have come together to coach and guide the universities in a good blended model. That let me begin by thanking Professor Sally Wade, Dean at Anglia Ruskin University, and Mr. David Gloucester, Director for Education, Royal Institute of British Architects. Thank you to Vice Chair, India at the UK IBC, Delia Hannigan, Director Education at Sanam S4, and Parvin Malhotra at the India Leading. Thank you, Kalyan, for doing all the introductions. Professor Michael Knowles, thank you so much for bringing this panel to all of us in India. I mean, I think it's a great timing, and on behalf of all of us, I would like to thank Saloni Badan, without whose logistics and all the support, this session would not have been possible. So with that, thank you so much. Namaste.